Hey guys, it's me Jacob. Welcome to my channel. This video is going to be about the fifth day of my JavaScript studying. So for those of you that don't know, basically I like to do pretty intense things sometimes, and so for some reason I decided I was going to try and learn JavaScript a lot better. And so right now what I'm trying to do is basically um, study as much JavaScript as I can for like probably 30 days, maybe longer though. What I might do is switch to something like Python on day 30 and then do that. But basically, I'm going to keep this whole pattern going where I study really intensely and then kind of try and dump some of my thoughts or some of the feelings that I have about the process in general, so that I can get better at it, but also perhaps so that other people can do it themselves, and learn potentially from some of the, insights that I have, or point out some problems. Although I have to be honest, most people don't probably, helping someone else out in the world by coming and telling them their problems and like actually trying to help them seems like a behavior that very few people actually have the time or energy to do. And so I think when you see people pointing out problems of other people, most of the time they're just criticizing them for their own satisfaction. They're not actually trying to help someone, because I think that actually helping people is a very time intensive thing, which, individuals have to take care of themselves a lot of the time. There isn't that much cooperation in the world as there could be. It's unfortunate. That's at least been my experience. Maybe that's just my own problem. But anyways, all unrelated. So how am I feeling? How is the how's the JavaScript study going? Well, some good things for sure are, I think I've identified the resources that I'm really going to probably jump into. One of them, I've talked about this before, is the ECMAScript specification. And there's basically this website that has this ECMAScript information on it. And perhaps I should sort of do something a bit more like that. Maybe I should share my screen. I'll do that. I'll start doing that probably again. But yeah, this site I'm going to probably read through for those of you that don't know, and I'm going to learn a lot more about the whole ecosystem and everything. ECMAScript is basically a specification for a type of language, and JavaScript implements that interface through browsers implementations such as V8. Okay? That's the only one I really know. That's the extent of my ability to really talk to that point. But it's an interface, and so it's worth knowing. Everything that you can do in JavaScript, I think, should be in that specification. I'm not sure. Okay? So it's something I'm interested in reading. Some other things, let me see. Yeah, I've already talked about this, but whatwg.org has a lot of good stuff, like about different standards like HTML encoding and the DOM. Wikipedia, I'm probably going to go through a bunch of that stuff too. Oh yeah, the whatwg.org has also an XML HTTP request standard, which is super useful because that's like what your standard HTTP request is. Probably powers like 80% of the internet. I mean, minus the WebSockets and stuff. Yeah, those are the main. Those are really really dense things. Honestly, those specification documents are like kind of like RFCs. They're very large, so it should take a long time to actually get through those. That's sort of the documentation. I mean, I'm obviously looking at MDN more, specifically the web APIs, things like XML, XHR requests, WebSockets, storage API. I've never used that. There's like an indexed DB. There's all this different stuff I know nothing about, So I'm going to try and learn some of that because, trying to become the best programmer I can, and I'm focusing specifically on web, right? I could focus on other things, but I'm focusing specifically on web. and specifically on JavaScript and Python. But right now, JavaScript. Because there are more than just JavaScript. There's more ways to do the web than just JavaScript, but I'm focusing on that angle because it's the most ubiquitous one. But, okay, so those are some of the documentation that I found that I'm going to probably start chewing on. But I actually added a bunch of new libraries that I'm going to be reading the source code of slowly but surely. Let me just get to my thing so I can let you know. Okay, so I added Axios, standard JavaScript XHR library. That's asynchronous, as many things are in JavaScript. I added Lodash. A general utility library is about all I know about it. And interesting things, I added Axios' /lib. So if you go to their GitHub, the /lib is what I added, and it's 59 kilobytes. Lodash, I added the entire thing, but only the JavaScript and some of the other files like TypeScript and CSS files. I added those, and Lodash, interestingly, is 1 megabyte in size. And then I added React/packages. This is where the meat of the React library is, which is like a big deal because I'm a React developer. I'm going to be writing React code. That's what I have experience with. But I'm focusing on JavaScript in general, but React's made with JavaScript or TypeScript. I'm not sure. I think it's mostly JavaScript. But anyways, so this thing is the biggest thing I've downloaded so far. This directory is 10 megabytes, 10.5 megabytes, which is like 1,300 files. This thing would take a long time to get through. So I've tracked reading source code for me before, and to put it in perspective, I've been reading like a lot lately, the last 5 days or something, and right now I've only read 3 megabytes, and I'm reading quickly. I'm not like comprehending everything I'm reading. I've talked about this before. The way that I read code is I use like basically I have a site for myself which has all the code basically loaded there, and then I just use this thing inside of the browser which just scrolls down, and then I usually just click scroll, right, and I just look at it, and it keeps going, and usually I can't comprehend it nearly fast enough because of how abstract it is, and also because of, I guess, the speed, right? But some things are just like you can't understand one file unless you've seen another file, and you can't understand that file until you've seen another file. It's like you can't know what's inside of a function and what it's really doing until you see it in enough contexts and you see what constitutes it itself, right? So it's a bit of a tautological problem. You can't really unveil all the ambiguity of this stuff until you literally get through it multiple times. But 10 megabytes for React packages, that would take like that'd probably take 1.5 weeks of intense reading to get through once, and that wouldn't be good enough. You'd have to go through it multiple times. Like in my experience, the way that I read source code, if you read through it once at the way that I'm reading through it, you're not going to understand it. It's like literally just exposure to it. It's like, this is some of what it is, and you have a vague idea afterwards. You definitely know how big it is. You know how intimidating it is. You know some of the weird stuff that didn't make any sense. You know some of the stuff that was like reused over and over again. A lot of these libraries have patterns that the authors really leverage hard. It's like how they want to do it, how they like doing it, how they understand how to do it. So they do it that way. But it's like not the only way you can do it, obviously. And when you compare one library against another with different authors, or even the same author but at different times, it can be totally different how it's done, even though it basically accomplishes the same fundamental requirements in the real world, right? So, super interesting stuff. Like, I love just reading all these different permutations and just seeing them, because there's no other way to really see just there's a huge amount of creativity in the computer science realm, and mostly I say that because there isn't one way to do anything. It's just like, and so you kind of just pick whatever way you want to, and there are cascading implications of your decisions, but I think a lot of people can't predict that at all. They just do something that they kind of get as long as they can until they run into problems, and then they try and handle those problems as best as they can, but it's just this ongoing incremental chaos, sort of. So, anyways, yeah, so I added React packages, and that's the main one. But right now we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 libraries that I'm currently nursing my mind with. Just a shitload of information here, would take a very long time to get through, but this is going to be the approach that I use to assimilate JavaScript into my mind, right? And so I've talked about this before, where it's like there's two different approaches to trying to get like really good at something, right? The first approach is, we're all playing this board game, and what you do is you read the rules, and then you read the rules over and over and over again, right? The other approach is you don't read the rules at all, but you read a bunch of sequences of the game being played. Maybe a more simple way is to talk about it in a concrete way. Chess. You can either read the rules of chess over and over again, which is like reading documentation, or you can read chess games played between two different players, where basically, the notation just says what move they do, one after another. And that's the entire thing. That's like source code. That's like the real world patterns that constitute a very complex, game in general, that has huge amounts of different choices that you can make. But when you actually look at the real world, there are ones that happen over and over again for specific like libraries or authors or whatever, or even cross library, man. Maybe they're just like language. Some languages have a very specific patterns that happen in them over and over again, right? So obviously you want to take a hybrid mixed approach. You don't want to just ignore the rules forever. But I'm definitely someone who's like, read the rules like 10%, 20%, and then read the like games or the source code like 80% of the time, of your energy, right? What's really cool is when you actually realize something through reading source code that was never told to you, but it is a rule. That's a very, very satisfying thing. And I think it represents the best way to learn something. To learn it through like just intuitively seeing the thing so many times, and you're like, this is probably what it is doing and what it is for. And then you look it up and you're like, oh, okay. Some things though are very hard to figure out, and that's when you have to try and look them up in the documentation. But so anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. People who have watched any of my videos probably at this point realize how much I push or how much I advocate reading source code. There are some pitfalls to reading source code, like, and I guess just to wrap up this video, I'll just talk to this real quick. Like, if you see the string like UTF-8 or something just in some source code, and you've never heard of that, and you've never heard of Unicode, my approach to it is like, oh, okay, it's just a random symbol. I don't really care. I move on, right? But if you see it enough times in enough pieces of code, then you start to realize, you're like, oh, UTF-8 is here. It's in Lodash. It's in Axios. It's in React. It's over here. It's in this Python thing. Eventually, you start to realize it's a very, very ubiquitous thing, right? You can't figure this out if you go depth first into stuff, because you don't actually know how widespread the infection of UTF-8 is, right? But when you go breadth first and you're just looking at all of these different things at a surface level, you don't really get them, but you do understand that this has UTF-8 here and UTF-8 here. You eventually, it's sort of like a good way to curate what is really, really ubiquitous. And then you can go onto the internet and be like, what is UTF-8? Because at the beginning, you don't even know to search what is UTF-8. And so I think this is one of the huge advantages of source code is it kind of intrinsically focuses you on the things that are most important. But you know, you can't obviously you can't figure out what UTF-8 is inside of the context of source code, and that's where it falls apart. Like if you were only allowed to look at source code, I don't know that you could figure out some things. And I think that's where the specifications written in like technical English that exist on the internet, like RFCs, Python enhancement proposals, you know, the ECMAScript, MDN's documentation. I think that these things are obviously like they're like balancing out this part of code that is just ambiguous. There's no way to really know. The information isn't there, and that's where you can't do only source code. That's where you need that like 20% of going out into the real world and just reading English and specification documents, because it fills in so much. And you realize how like code really, you know, it's building to the requirements that are on the internet already. So anyways, that's I guess that's like my dump for today on it. I feel the same as yesterday. I'm still in like, you know, purgatory. I'm not like feeling like things are clicking, but I am confident and satisfied with the you know, the commitment and the grind that I'm doing. I know that if I just stick to this, like, it will click, and when it clicks, it will click very hard, as you know, hard. I'm not like really smart or anything, but I think my persistence is a very good virtue. I think it's been one of the things that helps me accomplish the small amount of things that I have accomplished in life. You know, obviously having a lot of intelligence, that would help with everything, but who knows how much you have. It's very hard to actually like pin that down. But persistence, that's much more transparent. You can be like, this guy only put in this much time and then he gave up. This guy put in like twice as much. So anyways, I feel good about it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Check out my blog, pieharbor.com. Leave a comment or something, you know, and thanks for watching. And, you know, keep learning. Value your attention and keep learning. Don't waste your attention on foolish things, or try not to. We're all humans. We all waste our attention. But you know, it's good to aim for like your best. So thanks for watching, and peace out.